Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Ajker Alapon, a show that is talking about the latest stuff, also talking about things that you might want to know or didn't know about in the community, in the country, across the world. I'm your host, Abul Hasnat, and I have a very special guest with me here today. We are going to be talking about Mr. Ken Ford Powell, writer, and what some of you may have noticed following on Facebook or looking at other social media outlets, that Ken actually looks at the global village and integration of villages and the ideas between the East and the West, and how they can probably mix together and share good practice, share good ideas. So I'm not going to be doing much talking. I'm here with Ken, live on air. Ken, thanks for coming on. I might as well get a live handshake there.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you, and I think it's it's a pleasure. I've only met you half an hour ago, and so much I've learned from you. But I think it was we want to look at yourself, Ken, and then the things that you're doing, the books that you've been writing,
sure,
and sort of actually more enlightening those that are watching here in British television, what they're really missing out on, or what they sort of completely overlooked across the world, not just Bangladesh, but of course you've got a very keen interest in Bangladesh, which we're going to come into. So. I'm going to first on to you, Ken. Tell us a bit about yourself. Where it all started from. So yourself, where you started from as a teacher and a writer, and slowly tell us about how Bangladesh became an interest to you.
Sure. Well, it's odd because really I would be the last person on this earth you'd think would end up going over to Bangladesh. I grew up in a coal mining town just outside Leicester during the 70s and 80s. That was at a time when the mining strikes were going on. The town knew a lot of depression and things like that. And kind of right-wing groups like the National Front and the BNP and so on were really quite strong. And so there was a general kind of hatred towards foreigners, towards outsiders, this kind of desire to kind of blame anybody for losing their jobs, and so on and so forth. So I kind of grew up with this kind of idea, this attitude that Asians and other foreigners were definitely not kind of welcome. The typical kind of EDL and UKIP kind of way of thinking that we have today.
We can give for today.
For today, that's definitely the kind of the same kind of idea, which is quite frightening for me to see now. I wouldn't say kind of like I was racist, but I was just very wary of other cultures. It wasn't part of my experience. And then in 2005, my wife, who's an occupational therapist, was invited to be part of a medical team going out to an NGO, a medical NGO in Bangladesh, in a very rural, very poverty-stricken kind of area. And she went out there for a few weeks, and she came back and she says, "You have got to come out." And I did, and that kind of changed everything really. And I trained as a teacher in Cambridge, which is where I met my wife, and I'd been very much kind of involved in education, and really didn't think I was going to be doing anything other than just being in the school that I was at up in Cumbria and live out the rest of my days doing that.
I have to ask, just before I get you to move on, because that's a lot of people, a lot of British Bangladeshis probably will never understand this mind frame, but I mean, for you to have that initial view back when a lot of the racism was going on in the Midlands, and you yourself were quite sceptical of the British Bangladeshi or British Asians in general.
Yeah.
So for your wife to actually come and tell you that it's amazing out there, I mean, I have to ask, just out of personal interest as well, what was really running through your head? Did you actually believe her, or?
I did, to be honest. I mean, I think I had more of a kind of a global outlook already then, but that was more just I wanted to explore other countries and things like that. Whereas she was a good kind of Cumbrian lass, and was just going to stay put in England and have a steak and ale pies and all that kind of thing. That was her kind of like way of thinking. But she was challenged by somebody to go out. She's got a great heart for the poor and for the suffering and so on. And she said, "Yeah, go on, I'll give it a go." And she went out there. And the story she was telling me by emails, of what she was seeing out there, something resonated inside me. And I just found myself thinking, I empathise with what I'm hearing from this. So when she came back and said, "Oh, you've got to go out there," I said, "Yeah, sure. I'm good for that." And so we did. We went out the next year, and our family began what is now a lifelong love affair with Bangladesh.
Wow. I mean, before we move on to Bangladesh and your time there, I mean, I really wish to cover more of your time in England as well, because, I mean, you studied in Cambridge.
I did, yeah. I was down at I was doing a music degree down at the Anglia University down there, which is where I met my wife there as well. And yeah, I mean, really, I mean, I started as a musician, and I kind of ended up doing teaching just because I needed the money, you know, as a poverty-stricken student, really, you know, I needed cash somehow, and it was either that or work at McDonald's. So I chose the idea of doing some private teaching. I found that I just really loved working with kids. And there was just that kind of wow factor when you're kind of teaching something that you think's relatively simple, and they're kind of going, wow, that's brilliant, that's wonderful, I can't believe I can do this, and you know. And that was with music back in those days, and I was doing a music degree, and then I did a master's in musical composition. And gradually I was just doing more and more teaching and loving every minute of it. And there came a point where I thought, actually, I don't want to just do this one-to-one. I want to be in a classroom. I want to, you know, have 30 kids in front of me and just be teaching them all. And so I started my kind of classroom teaching in Cambridge. Which does get referred to a little bit actually in one of my books. There's some stories based on that, because it was an upward struggle. This is not an easy ride. I trained on the job, and it was very difficult to do. And at one point I thought, I can't do this anymore. I'm not cut out for classroom teaching. But gradually I got the hang of it, and got used to what was needed, and just carried on loving doing the teaching. So we moved up to Cumbria, where my wife originally hails from, and I got a job as deputy head of music at a school there, and I spent 8 very happy years there. And I would say that was the biggest tussle for me when it came to leaving Bangladesh. The biggest thing for me was the problem of leaving the school. I didn't want to leave the kids that I, you know, was already teaching, that I loved so much, and I put it off, which is why we ended up doing several trips to Bangladesh before eventually I said, okay, yeah, let's move to Bangladesh. I was ready for it then.
I mean, you went to Bangladesh and you taught there. Just coming back to Cumbria and sort of that change. So, I mean, the breakdown of pupils or students, whichever the way you refer to it now, the ethnic breakdown of the students that you had in Cumbria, was there many Asians? No,
not at all. Again,
wow.
I mean, I just lived in a very white world, really. You know, there were maybe, in a class of 30, you'd be lucky if you get 1, maybe 2 Asian kids. We had, you know, the various, you know, so-called Indian restaurants, which of course, as we know, are mostly Bangladeshi, and it was mainly a Bangladeshi community that was there. But they were so far spread out. There were very few of them indeed. So really, yeah, it was a white world. So no Asian context,
so, I mean,
again.
You weren't even given a hint of what a Bangladeshi student was like.
When my wife first went out, and I told my students that she was out there, kind of thing, and they said, "Oh, where?" And I turned to the map. And I knew it was near India, and I looked on the map and I went, I can't find it, you know, because on the world map, Bangladesh is just so small, you know, and it was like, where is it? I've got no idea where my wife actually is. And quite genuinely, I could not even find the country on the map, you know, before I went out there myself. Wow. That was how little I knew.
And so then, really, let's move on to you. So your trip across now, I mean,
yeah.
As you said, it was your wife and the work that she did that really took you over there. Just before we look at the teaching and stuff that you did, just really want to cover some of the stuff that your wife did, because I mean, let's not take that lightly. I mean, the work she did out there was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was she's the real hero, you know, as far as I'm concerned, being out there. She worked with the rehab centre at the NGO we're at, a place called LAM. And as I say, it's up in the northwest near the Dinajpur area, working with the very, very poorest people. And it's a hospital NGO. It runs various clinics. I think there's something like 25 clinics that go out into the rural villages, giving health care and advice and things like that. It now has a nurse training centre. It has a school where I ended up, and it has a rehab centre, and that was where my wife was very much based. And I'll tell you one wonderful story actually, which really highlights the kind of work that she was doing on a daily basis with her staff. And there was this boy who had suffered from a condition that meant that he had basically been paralysed for a certain length of time, lying down on a bed for a long period of time, and he'd got bed sores that had gone right through to the bone on his hips. And the problems and issues he'd had, medically speaking, had been dealt with, but he now basically couldn't walk, and he was completely demoralised. He believed he was going to be paralysed and never be able to get out of bed again. And he was, you know, as I say, medically was sorted, but now needed to go to the rehab centre to be rehabilitated. And it was my wife that worked with him and persuaded him to actually get on his feet and start doing the exercises to walk again, and fighting through, as much as anything, a psychological depression, you know, a determination that, you know, life had ended for him. Because as you know, it's very difficult for poor people out there. If you are disabled in some way, then life is almost impossible, really. And so that was his opinion, that, you know, everything was gone, you know, that life was going to end. She got him walking, she got him staggering off, and the last she saw of him, you know, he'd got out of a wheelchair and was starting to use crutches and things like that. When we actually moved there many years later, this handsome young man walked into her rehab centre and gave her a big hug and thanked her. He was completely normal, could walk absolutely fine, was living his life, doing very successfully for himself, and genuinely, like, put it down to you know, her getting him back on his feet again. And that's just a wonderful success story, and that happens day in, day out at the rehab centre at this NGO, and I'm sure at many similar kind of facilities all over Bangladesh.
It's interesting that, because it's I mean, for your wife to be out there as a Bideshi, as a foreigner, to them, it's I mean, do you feel that has automatically created an essence of hope for these youngsters? Because I mean, there's no doubt there were practitioners and doctors prior to that, and it's almost like they failed to give that push. I mean, there was nothing medically or technically brilliant that your wife did. She just gave that human push to him, and that's, I mean, prior to that, that was seriously lacking in Bangladesh, wasn't it?
I think so. I think there's still, because of the hierarchical nature of society in Bangladesh, you know, there tends to be the kind of like the doctors and the medical people up here, and everybody else is down there. She just brought a different perspective, and I think a lot of Bideshis can do that. And that's I think one of the good things that the West can offer, that ability for us to be able to talk as equals and to show respect to one another. And that meant, of course, being out there and showing respect to the culture, to the people that are already there, and not rocking boats, but at the same time just being able to offer just something a little bit different. And yes, you're right, it gave hope, and it does give hope to people. You know, they see just a different attitude and a different way of doing things.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I mean, I hope other countries and maybe even forget other countries, other parts of Bangladesh that haven't actually yet had sort of foreign influence. Maybe you know, they can take these ideas from where you practice. We've got to go for a quick break, and I'm trying to find the best way of summing it up, but I'm not going to sum it up, because I think we're going to go straight back onto Ken's time in Bangladesh, because Ken. For everything he's done in the UK, he spent a good five years of his life in Bangladesh. So we want to have a look at that, and then let's not forget he's a writer. There's a couple of books here which I'm not going to hold up yet. I'm going to hold up in our next segment, and that's when we'll look at the stuff he's done then. So we're going to go for a quick break now, and don't go away. We'll see you very shortly.